Hey guys, tonight we crawl into the silk-draped chamber of a world where mourning smells like rose oil, and power tastes faintly of honeyed wine left out too long in the sun. You're lying on a velvet couch, now naked marble statues staring from the corners as if they're silently judging you for being born in the wrong millennium. Rome, you're not just in it. You are it. Gold jewelry presses into your skin. The air is thick with myrrh, with politics, with perfume, and with something much harder to wash off: ambition. And as the heavy funeral curtain falls for some high-ranking husband cause of death, a cough, or a convenient fall, you, a Roman widow, stretch out your limbs like a cat who's been waiting. Waiting to inherit, waiting to seduce, waiting to finally play the game that only begins after the husband dies. Because in Rome, widows don't cry, they calculate. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in the cool stillness of a Roman domus just after dawn. The kind of house so rich it doesn't creak. The silk sheets smell like lavender. And the pillow beside you is indented from a head that used to be your husband's until last week. There's no dramatic wailing, no toga-clutching, no self-flagellation. That's for the hired mourners. You're brushing a faint smear of kohl from under your eyes as you rehearse your widow's look in the polished bronze mirror. A little more veiled, yes. A little more fragile, definitely. But behind the black mourning tunic, your mind is dressed to kill. Rome doesn't expect you to grieve. It expects you to pivot. Your late husband, let's be honest, was mostly a stepping stone. One foot in the Senate, the other in the grave, and a will written during a fever. Luckily, he left everything to you: his estate, his name, his political enemies. That last one is the real inheritance. The ink on the will isn't even dry when the first suitor sends flowers. Not romantic ones, strategic ones. Lily, maybe. An olive branch. A bribe. You hold it in your hands, knowing every petal is a title, is a little whisper. Can we talk? Because Roman widows are dangerous. You've got freedom, you've got money. You've got no father, no husband, no brother standing in your way. You can host salons, fund political campaigns, seduce philosophers, sleep with gladiators, and still be invited to temple. Unless, of course, you push too far. Because Rome loves its powerful women, most when they're statues. Now imagine this. You're walking slowly, deliberately, through the atrium. There's incense burning, citrus trees shedding tiny blossoms into the fountain, and a client waiting. In your tablinum, he says he's here to offer condolences. His hands are soft. His voice is lower than usual, but his eyes? His eyes keep glancing toward the papyrus scrolls on your desk. Estate deeds, tax relief petitions, a few letters, probably steamy, from your dead husband's rivals. You invite him to sit. Not because you like him, but because he doesn't know you already have all the leverage. This is where it starts. The seduction not for pleasure, but for power. Sex in Rome is rarely just sex. It's an exchange of currency, like coin or favors or wine. You've read about the Empress Livia, how she played the role of loyal wife while slipping her enemies subtle poisons and sweetened figs. Historians still argue whether she actually murdered her husband Augustus, or just gave him a gentle push. But you admire the elegance of it. And elegance, for a Roman widow, is the deadliest weapon. In your early 20s, you married for status. In your early 30s, you mourned for optics. And now, approaching 40, the age when most Roman women disappear into the background like cracked frescoes, you're just getting started. They say women your age are past their prime, but you have never been more visible. You are luminous with grief and calculation. Every whisper you make carries weight. Every glance you offer is an invitation or a warning. and you know the city is watching. Gossip clings to you like ivy. The Vestal virgins probably whisper your name during prayer. One senator's wife calls you that viper, but she's still angling for an invite to your next dinner party, because your feasts are legendary. You serve peacock tongues, saffron bread, and politics disguised as flattery. There's always a seat at the table for the man you want to ruin or the one you're sleeping with. Sometimes both. There's a story in the erotic spirit through history about a Roman widow who wore her dead husband's signet ring on a chain between her breasts. Not for love, but for access. She'd lean forward, cleavage framed just right, and the wax seal would press into contracts she'd already rewritten in her favor. No one ever questioned them. She was, after all, grieving. How could she possibly be manipulating entire provinces from her courtyard? A quirky tidbit you didn't ask for, but now can't unknow. Roman women sometimes used crocodile dung as birth control. You don't, but you do know how to pick your lovers. Gladiators, poets, even eunuchs, who often had more political access than the men who mocked them. You aren't picky, just precise. Like a knife, because in this Rome, the real currency isn't gold. It's secrets, whispers passed over silk sheets, hidden letters smuggled in fruit baskets, vows muttered not at the altar, but in the steam of the bathhouse. And you, widow of 3, mistress of many, you're fluent in them all. You step into the caldarium, steam curling up in tendrils that feel almost alive, licking the mosaics, wrapping around your ankles like gossip that hasn't reached the forum yet. The marble floor is warm beneath your feet, and the bath water, scented with rose and pine resin, glows golden in the lamplight. A slave ladles water onto hot stones, and the hiss is soft, like a whisper. She's back. You've come here not to wash, but to announce. This is your second bath this week, and that's a message. You're no longer hiding behind mourning veils. You're radiant with grief, of course, but also radiant with oil. This, for a Roman widow, is what a second adolescence looks like. You've already done the virtuous wife act, survived childbirth, hosted the Saturnalia banquets. Now finally, you get to reinvent yourself, not as someone's possession, but as someone's prize. The women in the frigidarium watch you over, their shoulders as you pass, draped in nothing but confidence and a thin layer of imported Syrian perfume. You know what they're thinking, and you know their husbands are thinking it too, because they've written to you. Some sent poetry, others sent peaches. One idiot sent a bust of himself carved from ivory. He thought it was charming. You used it to prop open your garden gate. Your bath attendant, a shy Cappadocian boy, helps you into the water. He's new. Probably doesn't realize yet that the richest women in Rome don't just bathe, they audition. You stretch slowly, letting your body slide beneath the surface, and you feel it again. The electric crackle of being both desired and feared. The men you attract are ambitious. The kind who look at your rings and see Senate seats. The kind who know you've inherited not just a fortune, but a vast web of alliances, brokers, bankers, scribes, and 3 very persuasive astrologers. One of them recently predicted your next husband would have a strong chin and a weak will. You're still laughing about that now, let's be clear. Roman men remarry fast. A senator could bury his wife at breakfast and be engaged by lunch. But Roman widows, you wait, you calculate. Because remarriage is a trap. The moment you say, "I do" again, all your property passes to him. Unless you engineer a different arrangement. Enter Gala, a widow who rewrote her own marriage contract to include a clause stating that no property may pass to the husband unless she is found dead under suspicious circumstances. She kept a knife under her pillow just in case. Historians still argue whether she ever used it. What they do agree on is that her second husband died in a boating accident. In his own bathtub. On land, you've heard of Cecilia Metella too. Rich, ruthless, respected. She once made a senator wait 6 months before she'd answer his marriage proposal, and only then under condition that she retained ownership of her. Vineyards, he agreed. He died mysteriously. She drank his wine at the funeral. The thing is, Roman society doesn't know what to do with powerful women who don't need permission to speak. They call you scheming. They call you lascivious. They whisper words like sorceress and Jezebel, even though Jezebel isn't even Ramon. But they still come to your parties. They still laugh at your jokes. And when the lights are low and the servants dismissed, they still confess things into your ear that could ruin careers. There's a sex story you once overheard at a women-only salon, where the wine was poured too freely and the laughter got louder than the flute music. It was about a widow named Lucilla, sister to the emperor, who seduced a foreign envoy under the guise of diplomatic translation. They supposedly spent 3 nights together, after which he suddenly reversed his entire treaty stance. Coincidence? Maybe. But Lucilla left with a new villa, and he left with a very inconvenient case of homesickness. Quirky detail you'd never expect. Some elite Roman widows trained songbirds to mimic political phrases overheard during dinners, then released them into the atrium to stir up rumors without ever opening their own mouths. One woman, Sempronia, trained her parrot to say the consul is weak, a phrase that led to 2 duels and 3 new laws about animal testimony. But back in the bath, the steam is thinning, and you're thinking again about what power tastes. Not like blood, like anticipation. You'll go home tonight to a bed warmed in advance by coals in silver bowls. You'll dictate letters by candlelight, one to a jurist you're grooming for influence, another to a poet you're grooming for pleasure. You'll smile at the memory of the man you married and the men you've outlived. The bath softens your skin, but not your instincts. You are a widow in Rome. You do not fade. You ferment into something stronger. The letter arrives before breakfast sealed. In red wax, hand-delivered by a courier too clean to be a real slave, too well-groomed to be anything but deliberate. You don't open it right away. That's part of the performance. You let it sit on the polished olive-wood table beside your figs and barley bread, as if it were no more urgent than a love poem from last season's admirer. But your fingers itch, because this isn't just a letter, it's a move. Maybe even a threat disguised as an apology. You finally crack the seal and unroll the parchment. It's written in that maddening legal euphemism Latin that only men and lawyers use when they're trying not to say the quiet part out loud. The writer offers condolences, then pivots with almost surgical awkwardness to a discussion of joint holdings, unclear boundaries, and cooperative redistribution. Translation: your dead husband owed someone something, and now they're hoping your grief has made you weak. But they forget grief is your camouflage, not your kryptonite. You smile, sip your watered wine, and reach for your stylus. This is going to be fun. You respond in soft ink, with language so technically correct, it threatens to sue itself. You quote his own uncle's rulings back at him. You drop the name of a magistrate you once shared a bed and a breakfast with. And, just for spice, you add a subtle reference to a Senate vote that's going to make his cousin's shipping monopoly very uncomfortable. The wax seal use, your husband's, yes, but also one of your own, an accidental impression left by a ring you had copied last week. By dinner he'll get the message, and if he doesn't, well, there's always the other kind of letter. The one written on silk, carried in a fruit basket, scented faintly with cloves, and closed with a lock of hair not entirely yours. That kind of letter opens doors, especially bedroom ones. Roman politics is just legal foreplay after all. Your maid enters with news. A visitor waits in the atrium. A man, wealthy, not particularly handsome, but he has that look, the slightly desperate gleam of someone who thinks marrying you will solve his debt problems. You make him wait. You adjust your necklace. You casually arrange your writing table so the most scandalous scrolls are just slightly visible. He enters, bows, opens with flattery so polished it squeaks. You carry your grief with such dignity. He says, eyes dipping to your collarbone. You tilt your head just enough to let him wonder if that's a signal or a trap. He brings up your late husband, then stumbles into a clumsy pitch about joining legacies. You counter with questions that make him sweat. How many estates does he own? What's his current tax standing? Has he ever been tried in court? Oh, only twice? You're delighted. You offer wine, not because he's earned it, but because it gives you an excuse to watch his hands. Men say the truth with their fingers, not their mouths. He's trembling. Not in fear, in ambition. You've become the shortcut he can't afford not to take. You've played this game before. So did Claudia Pulchra, the widow who charmed the senator's entire staff into leaking internal memos before turning down his proposal and leaking them to his rival. Historians still argue whether she was genuinely in love with her next husband, or just looking for someone with better handwriting and fewer enemies. Either way, she died rich, unprosecuted, and surrounded by imported lapdogs that outlived all her sons. Sex, of course, isn't always part of the deal. But when it is, it's almost never just for pleasure. Roman pillow talk is a confessional booth, a courtroom, and a war room all in one. You once heard a story about a scribe who confessed, mid-ecstasy, to altering legal contracts for his mistress, who happened to be a widow with a direct line to the Vestal archive. The moment he finished, she wrote down everything he said and handed it off to her notary before the poor man had even caught his breath. She ended up with 2 villas. He ended up posted to Armenia. Your own bed isn't just a bed. It's a place where decisions are made. You don't seduce out of vanity. You seduce for leverage, for timing, for secrets. The men you invite are rarely the ones Rome respects in daylight. They're the ones with keys to the things you actually need. Temple records, estate maps, whispered votes, the name of the girl your enemy's son keeps hidden in his summer house. Your sheets remember everything, which is more than you can say for most magistrates. Now, the quirky fringe tidbit you didn't ask for. Roman lictors, those bodyguard types with the bundles of rods, were sometimes known to moonlight as secret couriers for rich women like you. Not officially, of course. But the coin purse doesn't lie. You've used one before, to send an anonymous love note wrapped inside a legal summons. The recipient wept. No one's quite sure whether from romance or sheer legal panic. So now the visitor is gone, his sandals still echoing down your marble hall. You sit back, satisfied. You've rejected him, but politely. Left just enough warmth in your farewell to keep the rumor mill confused. You haven't said yes, but you've let him imagine it. And that's the first step in any negotiation. In Rome, love is a tactic, and you're not the widow of a man. You're the mistress of a legacy. You smell the perfume before you see her sandalwood and crushed violets, thick in the air, like a dare. She's leaning against the doorway of her garden pavilion, bathed in late afternoon light, hair pinned with a comb carved from bone. One ankle deliberately exposed beneath a silk hem dyed deep Tyrian purple. That color alone could fund a small war. She doesn't flinch when a peacock lets out its shrill, ridiculous cry behind her. In fact, she smiles, because that's her favorite bird. Not for beauty, though it's got plenty of that, but because its feathers once killed a man. Yes, literally. A single poisoned peacock feather slipped into a honeyed date, brushed lightly across the tongue of her 4th lover. They said he died with his eyes wide open, still smiling, as if he thought it was part of the foreplay. This woman, let's call her Aaliyah, is not like the others. You know her reputation. Bathhouse politics, gladiator boyfriends, temples built in her name while husbands drop like overripe figs. And yet Rome keeps inviting her to dinner. Because she doesn't just attend the party, she is the party. You've been summoned here tonight. Not formally, just a whisper from a shared tailor, a suggestion in a market conversation, but you know what it means. Elia doesn't call people over for tea. She calls them to choose sides. Her villa is impossibly decadent. Statues stolen from Greek ruins line the colonnade. The floor mosaics are scenes from myths you don't repeat in daylight. Leda Pasipau. That thing with the swan. But the centerpiece is the banquet table. Obsidian slab, surrounded by couches so plush they could swallow you whole. The food? Peacock tongues again. Not poisoned this time, or at least not for you. Because Elia doesn't waste venom on women. She recruits them. She greets you with a kiss on both cheeks and a smile that makes you wonder whether she already knows your dreams. You've been very quiet, she says, offering you a fig dipped in sesame and honey. Men must be nervous, and you know what she means. You've been amassing land, turning down proposals, sponsoring philosophers. That's always the final straw. Men can handle a woman inheriting gold, but ideas? That's too dangerous. Elia laughs softly, like silk tearing. They tried to charge me with impiety last month, she murmurs, brushing lint off her lap. Imagine me, ungrateful to the gods, as if the gods didn't ask me to survive. Over the next 2 hours, she weaves a symphony of scandal. You learn which senator's daughter is pregnant by a gladiator, which temple priest is embezzling grain rations, which general's wife has been buying up brothels under a false name. None of this is gossip. It's ammunition. And you're being offered a share of the armory. But the most chilling story comes over dessert dates stuffed with pistachios and minced mint. Elia leans in, voice like a lullaby soaked in arsenic. She tells you about her second husband. Wealthy, paranoid, cruel. He'd lock the doors at night from his side, whisper prayers against witches while she lay awake. One evening she served him a tonic of wine and goat's milk laced with poppy. Not enough to kill, just enough to loosen the tongue. He confessed everything: hidden debts, a forged will, a plan to sell her estate after staging her madness. He died peacefully, she says, picking at a pomegranate seed. Not that night, but eventually. Historians still argue whether women like Elia were sociopaths or survivors, whether they craved power or simply refused to drown in a world that punished widows for breathing. There's a theory that her garden parties were modeled after old fertility cults where women drank, danced, and plotted beneath moonlight, guarded by eunuchs and sacred dogs. Quirky detail: her favorite dog wore a collar engraved with the phrase, "Loyal to the bone, but not yours." That dog once bit a senator's son on the ankle. Elia sent him home with bandages and a marriage proposal. He declined. His father was indicted 2 months later. You leave the villa with your head buzzing, not from wine, but from implications. Elia never said exactly what she wanted. That's her genius. She paints the outline and lets you fill in the rest. But you know, the price of refusal, not death. Just social evaporation. Invitations rescinded. Rumors planted. A tax auditor knocking a little too often, so you don't say yes. But you also don't say no. You return to your own domus, the night wind curling in through the atrium, and you sit in the dark thinking about peacock feathers and pomegranate seeds. And about the strange new appetite blooming behind your ribs, not just for power, but for the taste of power. Your latest lover arrives late. A beautiful idiot with biceps for days and no knowledge of estate law. Perfect. You let him talk while you listen to the gaps. He mentions a senator's indiscretion, some affair, being kept quiet with imported amber jewelry. You file that away. And while he kisses your neck and murmurs bad poetry, you wonder how many other widows are doing exactly what you're doing right now. Gathering, waiting, preparing for the next funeral, the next feast, the next whisper turned weapon. And somewhere, in another villa, Elia is probably smiling. The game continues. The senator's toga is still crumpled on your bedroom floor, smelling faintly of wine and desperation. And you haven't decided yet whether to return it fold or send it back draped over the shoulders of one of your younger house slaves, just to remind him how ridiculous power can look when it's begging. He came to dinner expecting flirtation, maybe a discreet kiss behind a column. He left barefoot, without his dignity or his vote, having promised to oppose a land reform bill you didn't like, all because you let him believe that sleeping beside you meant sleeping next to influence. You didn't lie. You just didn't. Correct him. Now as sunlight cuts across the mosaic tiles of your floor, warming your thighs through the silk of your stola, you sip watered wine and reread the notes he scribbled on a wax tablet while half-dressed. He thought he was seducing you. That's the fun part. Roman politics is filled with men who think they're puppeteers when really, they're just exceptionally well-dressed marionettes, mouths moving with strings tied to your fingers. You've inherited your husband's name, his estates, and his enemies, but not his habits. He was cautious, the kind of man who double-checked his wine for poison, even at funerals. You've turned risk into a form of religion. While he counted denarii, you counted dinner guests. While he feared scandal, you learned how to survive one. Because a widow who knows how to weaponize her reputation is far more dangerous than a general with a legion. Men expect you to remarry. They can't imagine a woman with wealth and a womb not putting both to immediate use. But you've done something worse. You've remained unattached. Available. In play. The moment you commit, you become property again. But right now, your territory uncharted, unclaimed, full of resources that every man in Rome thinks he can conquer. And none of them realize they're walking straight into a trap disguised as a kiss. There's a saying in Rome, better to be the wife of a god than the widow of a man. It's a joke, mostly, but there's truth in it. Gods don't leave behind debts. They don't curse you with sons who try to sell your jewelry or brothers-in-law who think you owe them political favors. Your favorite widow story aside from your own, of course, is about Octavia, sister of Augustus, who buried more husbands than most people bury pets. She mourned publicly, dressed like a statue, and yet somehow managed to control vast estates, arrange imperial marriages, and sponsor playwrights who slipped her enemies' names into their comedies. Historians still argue whether she ever actually broke the rules or just bent them so gently no one noticed. Either way, her villa became a sanctuary for the powerful and the desperate, both of whom knew better than to cross her unless they wanted their family secrets recited in verse at the next festival. And speaking of secrets, you've got one warming in your lap right now. A scroll of correspondence between two senators plotting to rig a grain contract. It was meant to be destroyed. Instead, it was found accidentally, of course inside the laundry basket of a slave you just happened to free last week. You haven't decided what to do with it yet. Send it to the praetor anonymously. Leak it during your next salon? Or use it as leverage the next time one of them tries to block your patronage of the new temple being built in your name. You trace the wax seal with one finger, already imagining how their faces will look when they realize you knew before they even started scheming. Oh, and a delightful fringe tidbit for your mourning. In some elite circles, it's become fashionable for widows to host mourning retreats, exclusive countryside getaways, where they pretend to grieve while actually forming alliances, testing new lovers, and comparing notes on which funeral dress fabric makes senators weep fastest. At one such retreat, two rival widows allegedly faked a fainting duel, collapsing simultaneously at the mention of their husbands' names, only to argue later over who fell more gracefully. You've been invited to the next one. You're considering attending, if only to see what kind of emotional theater counts as sincerity these days. But tonight, you host your own gathering. Smaller than usual, selective, only 5 guests. 3 are senators. One is a visiting poet with a scandalous new epic about Venus and a goat. The fifth is your newest acquisition, a soft-spoken land surveyor with a talent for maps and an unfortunate crush on you. You see him between the two most ambitious guests, feed him honeyed walnuts, and gently steer the conversation toward land values and temple zoning. He doesn't notice how much he's giving away, but the others do. They'll remember his answers, you will too. Later, maybe you'll reward him with a kiss, or a commission, or nothing. Power is in the anticipation, as the night winds down, and laughter echoes softly off the painted walls. You catch your reflection in a polished silver dish. You don't look like a strategist, you look like a storybook. Soft, serene, elegant. But anyone who mistakes you for merely ornamental deserves what's coming to them, because you're not the senator's mistress. You're not his conquest. You're the reason he's still in office. You're the one who whispered the right name at the right time to the right priest. And tomorrow, when he stands in the forum and delivers his speech on public virtue and private restraint, you'll be the one watching from the shadows, deciding whether he survives the month. You slip barefoot through your garden at dusk, trailing fingers along the waxy leaves of lemon trees, past statues draped in ivy, toward the small shrine hidden in the back wall, where Venus and Hecate share a space that officially shouldn't exist. You light a little oil lamp, not because you believe it changes the stars, but because it might. Tonight is for things not spoken at Senate dinners. Tonight is for magic and mourning and messages sent by moonlight. You're not alone. Behind the curtain of cypress trees, the other women gather, widows, mostly. Some veiled, some not. Some smelling of incense, others of sweat and anxiety. All powerful, all watching. One by one, you place your offerings at the base of the shrine. Rose petals, strands of hair, a broken ring that once sealed a promise that no longer suits you. The priestess begins to chant, voice low and slow, rhythm like heartbeat. You close your eyes. Not to pray, exactly, but to focus. Because this isn't religion. It's strategy in disguise. Roman men think magic is for peasants, old women, or Eastern cults. They don't realize the most refined women in the city light candles and chant in Greek while grinding herbs with pestles carved from bone. You've seen senators laugh at love spells until they're lying awake at night, terrified that their erections mean they're cursed. You've seen them bribe Vestal virgins to bless their children, then scoff at your superstitions. But superstition is just unacknowledged fear. And you, tonight, are fear incarnate wrapped in silk and sandalwood. There's a woman beside. Eulalia, widow of a former general, who claims she once summoned a storm to wreck her brother-in-law's fleet. Historians still argue whether the storm was real, or if she simply paid off the harbor guards to fake a naval disaster. Either way, her brother-in-law retired quietly to Sicily and never returned. You're handed a clay tablet inscribed with a name, a lover, or an enemy, or both. You're to spit wine on it and bury it in the shrine. You hesitate, not because you're afraid, but because choosing a name means committing. Your fingers tremble slightly as you press the tablet to your lips, taste the bitterness of the wine, and whisper a name no one else hears. You bury it, it's done. The women around you begin to hum softly. One beats a small drum with her palm. Another draws patterns in ash on the stone floor. This is not performance. This is power in its rawest, quietest form, women creating space for themselves where none was given. Later, you return to the villa with ash still on your palms. Your maid looks nervous. She's seen these rituals before. She doesn't ask questions. That's why you keep her. You bathe, scrub your skin with salt, comb your hair with rosemary oil, and change into a fresh tunic. There's work to do. Letters to write, spies to pay. But first, you take a moment to read the latest from your favorite poet, Sopetia, the only woman bold enough to write erotic verse under her own name. Her words flicker like a match in your chest. I would rather be Ashes then embers burned once for glory, then smoldered forever. You smile. You understand. There's a story you remember half true, half whispered about a widow named Maxima who ran a network of girl gangs across the Subura, Rome's poorest and rowdiest district. She recruited slaves, runaways, and orphans, trained them in lockpicking, disguise, seduction, sent them into the homes of enemies dressed as dancers, cooks, even brides. Some stole secrets, some planted lies, some simply vanished after the wedding. Maxima herself wore a ring made from the tooth of a consul who tried to have her executed. Whether she killed him or just paid someone else to is unclear, but the ring made her enemies blink twice. That's what mattered. Tonight, your house is quiet, but your mind is not. You walk the halls, thinking of how many women like Maxima are out there, operating in shadows, rewriting history while the official scribes are busy flattering emperors. You pause before your late husband's bust. He looks noble, bland, vaguely annoyed. You whisper to him nothing sweet, just a thanks for dying at the right time. Oh, and your quirky tidbit of the night. Did you know that in certain parts of Rome, there were unofficial libraries run entirely by women, disguised as textile workshops? Women would gather under the pretense of trading silks or weaving techniques, but really, they were swapping poetry, recipes, and sometimes state secrets. One such group allegedly circulated a hand-copied Kama Sutra translation, annotated with sarcastic commentary on Roman men's lack of technique. You've seen it. It's hilarious. You finally settle in your reading room, the lamp low, the scrolls neatly stacked beside you. A small bundle of lavender smokes softly in the corner. You think of the name you buried. You wonder if it will make a difference. You wonder if it even needs to, because sometimes just believing in your own fury is enough to set things in motion. Outside, a dog barks once. Somewhere, someone important is probably making a very poor decision, unaware that tomorrow morning, his fortune will shift because of a tablet, a whisper, and a widow who decided enough was enough. The thing about secrets is they never really belong to the person who holds them. They belong to whoever knows how to use them. And as you lounge beneath a canopy of grapevines, idly turning a gold ring between your fingers, you remember exactly how many secrets are circulating beneath your roof right now. 10, 12, maybe 15 servants in total. From the oil-slicked bath boys to the laundry girl who knows how to unpick wax seals without breaking them. They move through the villa like ghosts always present, never acknowledged, yet each one is a pair of eyes and ears Rome routinely underestimates. You don't. You know better. You've cultivated your staff like a garden, choosing each one not just for their skills, but for what they notice. Your cook, for example, was once the scribe of a disgraced senator. Your seamstress has a brother who works in the archives. And the newest stable hand. He can't read, but he can remember entire conversations word for word. You feed them, clothe them, gift them little luxuries, scarves, earrings, perfume, and in return, they tell you everything. Who argued in the Senate? Who left whose villa after midnight? Who carries a dagger beneath his robes, and who's just pretending? You learned early on that a widow's real power isn't in her dowry or her name, it's in her house. A Roman villa is like a theater, and you are both the playwright and the lead actress. The atrium is your stage. The guest room is your trap. The storage closet behind the kitchen? That's your intelligence office. You've hidden documents. Their letters, forged receipts, even a lock of hair tied with the imperial seal. You don't even need to read some of them. Just possessing them is threat enough. And now you sit across from a young girl no older than 15 who rings her hands and avoids your gaze. She's one of your maidservants, but today she's brought you a confession instead of bath oils. She's been sleeping with the messenger boy from the governor's office. He talks in his sleep. And last night, he muttered something about land, disputes, falsified deeds, and a widow too clever by half. You lean back, not surprised, only mildly insulted by the lack of creativity. The names she gives you are useful. You tell her she's done well. You place a pair of pearl earrings in her palm and tell her to act dumber around the boy, not smarter. Let him think she's just a pretty distraction. Men give more away when they believe they're talking to furniture. Sex and intelligence have always overlapped in your world. Take the story of Phryne, a courtesan who once seduced half the assembly with just a glance and later financed the reconstruction of a temple because she overheard a magistrate's pillow talk. She wasn't technically Ramon, but her tactics are studied in every brothel and noble house from Gaul to Alexandria. There's even a play written about her. You've seen it twice. The actress playing Phryne wore a necklace suspiciously similar to one that disappeared from your cousin's estate a year ago. Historians still argue whether women like Phryne were exceptions or examples. You think they're missing the point. The real question isn't whether women use sex to gain influence. It's whether Rome ever gave them another option. And speaking of options, your jewelry box holds more than earrings. Tucked beneath the sapphires and garnets is a collection of forged seals, tiny wooden stamps carved with the crests of various houses. You didn't make them. A scribe you once seduced did. You keep them wrapped in silk, and you never use them unless the situation is dire. But just knowing they're there, that's power. You once intercepted a letter meant for your rival one that would have exposed your ownership of his shipping route in Cyprus. You replaced it with a forged confession of adultery, written in her hand, sealed with a borrowed stamp. Her husband divorced her quietly and gave you his vote on the grain tariff bill. He still thinks you're a patriot. You're not. You're a widow with good ears and better handwriting. Tonight, as candles flicker and your villa hums with quiet motion footsteps, whispers, the soft rustle of linen, you retreat to your study and pull out a scroll written in code. It's a list. Names, debts, loyalties. Some crossed out, some circled, some underlined twice in red. You add a new one. The senator whose slave overheard you singing in Greek. He told a friend you were part of a foreign cult. You're not. But you might be, if it makes him uncomfortable enough to misstep. Tomorrow you'll have him invited to a dinner he shouldn't attend, seated beside a man he fears, toasted by a woman who loathes him. Let's see how he handles that. Oh, and here's your fringe detail for the night. Roman sapphires weren't just for jewelry. Some believed they could detect lies, change color, grow warm when touched by dishonesty. Of course, that's nonsense. But you own one anyway. You wear it when you meet new suitors. It's not magic, it's theater. And theater, in your hands, is indistinguishable from truth. So as the moon rises and the city dims, you lie back on your couch and smile. Your house is quiet, but only on the surface. Beneath the marble, behind the curtains, through the laughter and soft footsteps, your little web of secret stretches, growing tighter by the day. And if one thread snaps, you already know which one to pull next. You walk through the forum in mourning black, but no one sees grief, they see currency. The fabric of your stola isn't just expensive, it's symbolic. Dyed with crushed insects worth more per gram than silver, cut to flow like river water with every step. Your sandals are soft goat leather dyed wine dark red, and the jade pin in your hair is older than 2 of the temples you pass. But it's not the clothes. It's the way the crowd parts for you without command, without question, without anyone daring to look you directly in the eye. You are a Roman widow walking alone through the economic heart of the empire. And every step you take says, I do not belong to anyone. I own myself, and the small but terrifying part of you enjoys how much that unsettles them. You're here to collect a debt. Not from a banker or a merchant, but from a former brother-in-law who made the mistake of thinking your late husband's death meant your silence. He promised to return your wedding dowry 400 gold aurei, plus 2 vineyards and a carriage. Team trained to respond to Greek commands. So far, he's returned nothing but excuses. Today, you're not asking. Today, you're retrieving. You pass marble columns and street performers and priests anointing statues, and none of them matter. Because what you're about to do is far more sacred than any ritual. You're about to make a man pay back what he owes. You find him at his usual spot, sitting with other senators, sipping watered wine under an awning embroidered with the crest of a family that hasn't earned it in 3 generations. He sees you and flinches. Good. You don't raise your voice. You don't cause a scene. You simply say, "It's time," and hand him a sealed note. He reads it. His face pales. The others try not to notice, but they do. Everyone does. Because when a widow hands over a scroll in public, it means she holds something in private. And Rome is a city built on whispers more than stones. That night, the vineyards are back in your name. The gold arrives in a chest carried by 2 sweating porters who refuse to meet your gaze. You reward them with wine and a silver coin each. Not because you have to, because it ensures they'll talk about how generous you were generous enough to distract from how easily you dismantled a senator's reputation using nothing but ink and implication. There's a story, one you love, about a widow named Hortensia. When the city tried to tax rich women to pay for war, she marched into the forum veiled, yes, but unflinching, and delivered a speech so sharp the men who heard it blushed like schoolboys. "You say we must pay," she said, "but you give. U.S. no power. You silence our voices yet want our wealth. We are not your wives. We are your equals or your creditors." The tax was reduced. Her name was whispered in every atrium for months. Historians still argue whether she wrote the speech herself. You don't care. What matters is that she stood there, like you. Do now, alone, visible, unapologetic. Power flows differently for women. It seeps rather than surges. You don't get handed office. You inherit leverage. You don't command armies. You command rumors, debts, alliances. Your dowry once bought a wedding. Now it funds silence. That's the evolution of influence. And you've mastered it. Oh, and your quirky fact of the night. Roman law once forbade women from inheriting land without a male guardian. The workaround? Temporary marriages. A widow would marry a distant cousin for 1 week, just long enough to legalize a transaction, then quietly divorce him the next market day. One woman did this 6 times in a year. She called it her estate cleansing. You've done it once briefly. He was sweet, if forgettable. You sent him away with a horse and a lifetime supply of barley. He still writes you poetry. You never reply. Tonight, you recline in your triclinium while a musician plays soft lyre melodies by the fountain. One of your advisors arrives with updates. 2 allies have honored their debts. One senator's son was seen entering a brothel you own, and the grain deal you supported is passing barely. You nod. The details matter, yes. But what excites you is the pattern, like watching a tapestry tighten on the loom. Each favor, each whisper, each carefully placed rumor, they all feed into a bigger picture. A version of Rome you're quietly authoring, because you're not trying to take over the empire. That's too crude. You're shaping the spaces between its laws, between its marriages and ceremonies and banking houses. You are the negative space on the fresco, the part no one names, but without which the whole thing collapses. The wedding is tomorrow, and no one's in love. You lie on your couch surrounded by swatches of imported linen and endless samples of perfume oils, half listening to your steward explain tax exemptions tied to widow remarriage. You nod at the appropriate moments, but your thoughts are elsewhere on the guest list, the seating chart, the precise moment during the ceremony when you'll pass the land deed to your new, temporary husband without anyone realizing it's not a dowry but a legal loop tied neatly in silk. This marriage isn't about vows. It's a paper bridge, an elegant legal fiction that will last exactly long enough to process 3 contracts. Restore your name to the ledgers of a lucrative temple lease, and protect your assets from a new inheritance law drafted by men who think women only count when they're counted by men. You chose the groom like one chooses a pen. Functional, discreet, replaceable. He's a younger cousin of a former lover, charming in that forgettable way. The kind of man who thinks being summoned by you is an honor. He doesn't realize he's a hinge on a door that will quietly shut behind him. You already know how the day will unfold. You'll wear white not for purity, but because it reflects sunlight in the forum and photographs well in fresco. The temple priest will bless the union with stale poetry, and the crowd will murmur respectfully while secretly betting on how long it will last. You'll smile in all the right places, press your fingers gently to your husband's wrist, and let everyone believe this is affection. You'll even let him kiss your cheek once, but only because it distracts from the moment you pass the second scroll to your notary behind the altar. It's not about deception. It's about choreography. Everything you do has a rhythm now. A heartbeat timed to contracts, loopholes, and optics. Rome may run on laws, but you've learned to dance between them. There's a story about a woman named Didia Clara, daughter of a short-lived emperor, briefly married to a provincial governor who thought she'd make him noble. She annulled the marriage after 2 weeks, citing excessive nasal breathing and failure to perform sacrificial duties with conviction. That last one was code for impotence, no one argued. She walked away with the man's estates and a reputation for being both hilarious and terrifying. Historians still argue whether she truly disliked him or simply needed his land for a theater project. Either way, her name lives on in a legal clause that protects widows from being sued for emotional damage during state ceremonies. You've cited it twice. And your quirky tidbit of the evening? In ancient Rome, some women commissioned life-size wax effigies of their late husbands, posed them in the corner of the atrium, and introduced them to guests as if still living. It was partly performance, partly tax evasion. Widowhood carried specific privileges, especially if grief was still publicly displayed. One woman, famously, had her husband's figure re-waxed every year to preserve his memory. You've considered it, but your villa's too full already with statues, secrets, and the kind of silence that hums like a tuning fork just before something beautiful breaks. Tonight, before the wedding, you sit alone in your study. You unroll the master ledger, your true diary, not filled with emotions, but with transactions, favors, feasts, betrayals. It's written in 3 inks, black for fact, red for risk, and gold for revenge. You make a new entry. Aulus Marcius, married for formality, relieved of vineyards by proxy, received in-kind compensation. It's clean, efficient. He'll be paid in title, perhaps a minor seat at a future festival. You'll keep the land. More importantly, you'll stay positioned close enough to influence, far enough to avoid obligation. That's the formula now. Intimacy without liability. Later, you dress not for beauty, but for symbolism. Your earrings are shaped like cornucopias. Your necklace an Ouroboros eternal return, self-contained power. Your sandals lace up past your calves, each not an echo of stories you won't repeat. The groom arrives with wine and nerves. You toast, you laugh, you pretend, but even he knows this isn't about love. It's about position. He stumbles through his vows, and you don't correct him when he mispronounces your father's name. He won't need to remember it. This marriage is as real as a theater curtain, impressive, dramatic, and destined to fall. After the ceremony, the guests disperse. The scrolls are signed. The tax benefit is locked. By morning, your name will appear next to 3 new temples. 1 grain consortium and an aqueduct expansion project disguised as charity. You lie beside your husband that night, separated by a decorative cushion, both of you pretending to sleep. He whispers something. You don't respond. He knows now. Not the whole game, just enough to realize he's a footnote in someone else's strategy. You don't hate him. You might even admire the quiet dignity of his surrender. But by the time the divorce scroll is drafted, he'll be nothing more than a helpful detour. Because Rome rewards visibility, but power thrives in movement. And tonight, you've moved again. Just enough to stay ahead of the law. Just enough to stay ahead of love. The tomb is older than it looks. Ivy spills down its sides like forgotten hair, curling around etched names so worn by rain, they now feel like rumors more than identities. You stand before it barefoot, the stone cool beneath your solace, and breathe. In the bitter scent of cypress and old offerings, wine stains in the dust, withered garlands wax from candles long since collapsed. This is where it ends, they think, but you know better. Because inside this tomb lies the woman who never truly died. She was a widow, yes, a mother, certainly, but also a strategist, a builder, a whisperer of empires. And if you listen closely, lean in past the marble stillness, past the statues with cracked fingers and blind eyes, you can almost hear the rustle of silk and scheming. Her name is Julia Domna, wife of one emperor, mother of another, and a quiet hand behind decisions that shook the empire like thunder from a sky. Rome pretended was clear. You've come here not to mourn her, but to learn, to study, because Julia didn't rule from a throne. She ruled from a garden bench, a letter desk, a curtained alcove in the imperial palace where senators accidentally revealed things while believing they were being listened to. She didn't wear a crown, she wore questions, sharp ones. And she asked them so softly that no one realized until too late they'd been maneuvered into changing policy, declaring wars, or sparing enemies she needed alive. They say her hair alone had its own entourage. Her bath oils were brewed from resins brought across 6 deserts, and her household was a mobile court of scribes, spies, philosophers, and midwives who knew more about power than most generals. Historians still argue whether Julia orchestrated her husband's victories or merely predicted them, whether she mothered Caracalla into madness or simply survived it, whether she ordered deaths or simply made them necessary. But the facts are fewer than the fears she left behind. And fear, as you know, is a more faithful legacy than bronze, statues, or temple altars. You kneel before the tomb and place your offering. Not flowers, not wine. A scroll, sealed in red. Inside is a list of names, living ones. Men who underestimated you. Women who sided against you. Debts unpaid. Alliances fraying. It's not for her, exactly. It's for you, a ritual, a reminder. That widowhood isn't the end of the story. It's the genre shift. Back at your villa, the air hangs heavy with late summer. Cicadas hum in the garden. A letter arrives unsigned. You recognize the handwriting. It's from a former rival now exiled, possibly dying. She congratulates you on your latest acquisition. She warns you not to trust the high priest of Jupiter. She includes a recipe for fig jam and a curse against foot rot. Women, you've come to understand, multitask better than myths allow. And your final quirky tidbit? The girl emperor you've heard whispers about, tucked away in the east, rumored to be raised in secret by scholars and soldiers loyal to a widow who once ruled from behind the veil of mourning. No one knows if she exists. But if she does, if one day Rome wakes to find its future shaped not by a boy in a gilded breastplate, but by a girl taught to rule through patience and shadows, well, it would not surprise you. You've planted seeds like that before. Not in wombs. In minds. Tonight, you climb to the upper terrace of your house, where the stars tangle like spun silver above the city's haze. Below, Rome breathes uneasy, bloated, drunk on its own myths. Somewhere, a senator prepares another speech on honor. Somewhere, a soldier sharpens a blade. Somewhere, a girl reads a letter written in visible ink. And here you are, widow of 3, patron of 4 temples, mistress of none. watching the world shift in your reflection on a silver plate filled with wine. You are not remembered like men are. You will not be carved in marble with a sword in your hand. But your fingerprints are everywhere, on treaties, on poems, on the necks of lovers who still dream of you. The empire will not say your name, but it will echo your strategies. Because, in the end, Rome never feared monsters. It feared women who learned how to build empires from the rubble of their husbands' legacies. So rest now, for a moment. Let the moonlight cool your skin. Let the stories you've woven tonight settle, like dust on old stone. You've been many things: a wife, a widow, a whisper, a weapon. And tomorrow you will be something else, something new, something even quieter and sharper. The night is long, but your kind always survives it. And now, as the firelight dims, and your mind drifts past crumbling temples and echoing footsteps through marble halls, let it all soften. Let the names, the games, the whispers melt into the hush of night. You are no longer in the villa, nor the forum, nor at the foot of a tomb. You're floating gently above it all, weightless, unbound, listening to the soft breath of a city that sleeps beneath its own ambitions. The stars are cool above your brow, your limbs heavy with story, your thoughts as slow and golden as spilled honey. You've walked through power tonight, cloaked in silk and sharpened glances, but for now, just breathe. Let the hum of the fan, the slow rhythm of darkness, guide you gently towards sleep. The widows are watching still, but they will keep their secrets just until morning. End of script. Sweet dreams.